everyone. I think it's time for us to start. I appreciate your patience, and I hope you've enjoyed dinner and had an opportunity to get a beverage. I know you've been socializing quite a bit this evening. So welcome to the 4th annual DifferenceMaker Celebration. And I just want to let you all know that this event is basically sold out. We had to create a waiting list. And Holly and I were busy reaching out to people. If you're not coming, let us know. We're going to shift people around here. So kudos to Holly and I for all of the work that they did. Now I look around here and I see many faces that I recognize, which tells me we must be doing something right because people keep coming back. So I really do appreciate it. The goal here at DifferenceMaker is to get students at UMass Lowell involved in creative problem solving, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And as you know, those of you that have been here before, this happens even before they take their first class. Every freshman that comes to campus in the summer for their orientation participates in an ideation activity and a problem solving activity. And our job then is really to start raising their awareness, help them to understand the value in innovation and entrepreneurship and how it can be used as a tool to solve really important problems. And so tonight you are going to hear from some of the teams, some of the ways that they've decided to tackle problems here in the region and in different parts of the world. So I'm really excited about that. The program has grown. We started in 2012. I was just talking with the Chancellor back in 2012. She asked me to join the administration, which I'm deeply appreciative for, although I still haven't gotten a sabbatical, but that's another story. We talked about how can we put together a program that would be open to students of all disciplines, students at all levels, whether they're freshmen or seniors or graduate students. And she and I, and Chancellor Marty Meehan at the time, we spent time looking at different models around the country. We went to Arizona State, we went to UNC Chapel Hill. We visited schools and we pulled those elements together into a program which many of you students out here have really been quite successful at. So I'm very excited about that. There was a slide popping up. Holly, thank you for the loop. There was a nice impact slide, but I thought I would highlight some of the successes over the last few years. We've had over 3,000 students, individual students a year, participate in DifferenceMaker activities. We've awarded roughly $300,000 in funds that alumni have contributed and corporate sponsors have contributed to student teams. These teams have formed 19 companies, they've received 8 issued patents, and those teams have raised over $1.3 million in angel investment funds and grant funds. So that's really quite an accomplishment. We even have companies that are revenue positive right now. We have 2 companies between them. They've generated $200,000 in revenue just last year. So we're really excited about that. I know you'll see some of these teams early, but just for those of you that are new here, the teams really run the spectrum. So this isn't just a business plan competition. It's not just about creating the fastest growing company. It really is about creating sustainable solutions to problems that the students care about. We don't identify the problems they work on. They come to us. They say, this is something that's important. And then what we do is we help them scaffold a team around that problem that brings in perspectives from different areas. So an engineer may come to us, may have an idea for a prosthetic limb, but they know nothing about health science. And so hopefully we can team them up with physical therapy and some of the other disciplines so they can come up with a better solution. Or a psychology major may come to us and they may want to work on changing or addressing issues of hunger among folks in the neighborhood. But they don't know anything about fundraising, or they don't know about a business plan, so maybe we can team them up with marketing students and with folks who can help them with that. So the idea here is really to help them to develop these sustainable solutions. Sometimes it's a business, it may be a nonprofit business, it may be a student club, but the idea is to have an impact in a lasting manner. So tonight we're going to celebrate some of those accomplishments of our students. Before we do that, there are a lot of people that I have to thank. And so I thought, I know at the end of the night you'll be ready to leave. We have some great speakers lined up tonight. So I thought I should thank folks right now. So first, I would like to thank our faculty fellows. So there are a lot of different people that make DifferenceMaker possible. We have a couple of staff, but there are also a lot of people who commit time and volunteer time. So at this point, I'm going to call out the names of the faculty fellows, and I would just ask them if they could stand so that we can thank you. The faculty fellows are faculty from each of the 6 colleges at the university. We have a conversation with their chair and their dean about people who could help our students, help them form teams, help mentor them, help move them along. And they play a really important role here. So our fellows from Fine Arts, Humanities, and Social Science, Michelle Bayou. Michelle, would you please stand? And Neil Shortland. From the Graduate School of Education is Zaman Shaheen. From the Kennedy College of Science is Mike Noray. College of Health Science, we have 2 faculty fellows, Mazan El-Ghazari and Brent Schell. Thank you, guys. From the Manning School of Business, we have Professor Michael Siuchta. From the Francis College of Engineering, we have Hunter Mack. And I think it was Hunter actually does class this evening, so they are a dedicated group. I also want to let you know, of course, we can't get all this work done without the support of the deans and the chairs in the different colleges, because this really is meant across the colleges. So I do want to thank the deans that are here this evening, and the deans that can't be here this evening. But we have Dean Eleanor Abrams from the Graduate School of Education. We have Dean Joseph Hoffman from the Francis College of Engineering. Dean Belakechi from the Kennedy College of Science. I see Dean Shorty McKinney from the Zuckerberg College of Health Science, Dean Sandy Richtermeyer from the Manning School of Business, Dean Luis Falcone from Fine Arts, Humanity, and Social Science, and Dean Jim Canning. So a round of applause. We really do appreciate We have, so there, a program like this takes funding, as well as political support. So I do want to thank the folks on Executive Cabinet who are here this evening. Certainly my boss, the Provost Michael Veda, Vice Chancellor Joanne Yastrzemski, and Vice Chancellor John Fudo. Thank you very much. I did mention funding, didn't I? I've joked with Holly and Hara over the years, and I've joked with my teams. I mean, my job, as it's changed over the years, really has become 2 parts, right? One is political cover, right? Helping to support and cover their initiatives, and the other is helping to raise money. Although we are working on that with Holly, right? You're doing a great job learning that skill. But I do want to thank, we have several sponsors here that made this evening possible. And so first I would like to thank Ed Gallagher from Comcast. Ed has been a big supporter, and Comcast is a big sponsor. I also want to thank an alum and the CEO of Digital Credit Union, Jim Regan. Jim has been a big supporter of DifferenceMaker from the early days. In partnership with the Manning School and with DifferenceMaker. We have some new friends here this evening. We have some friends from Circle Health, and I believe we have Paulette Vieira and Diane Maltes here this evening, right? Thank you very much. They're doing a special event with the Zuckerberg College of Health Science around. And then finally, our friends from Enterprise Bank. I believe we have Sean Moriarty here this evening, and his boss there, Chet Zablek, has been a big supporter of our work here, so we really do appreciate that. Thank you. So we tried something new this year. I know in the past this was a free event, but nothing's really free, as my chancellor will remind me periodically. Not all the time, but just once in a while. And so we have table sponsors this evening. So I do want to thank the Manning School of Business, the Kennedy College of Sciences, the Francis College of Engineering, and Online and Continuing Education for your support of tables this evening, because that made it possible for some of our students to come at no charge. So thanks very much. So before I start, and I am going to wrap this up quickly. I just want to ask the team that makes this all possible come here. Holly, would you come on up here? Is Ha Fo, are you in the room? Where's Ha? Where's Tom O'Donnell? Tom, come on up. And Jackie Buckley. Where's Jackie Buckley? She's probably out at the front desk, right? I'm sure. So come on up for a minute so people can see you and know who you are. I mean, it's these folks. So again, I mentioned I run cover, I help raise money. But Holly, Tom, and Jackie Buckley, they do the work, right? They work with the students. They visit 150 classrooms with faculty, fellows, and students each semester. They make sure the deadlines and everything are met. This night, the work at DifferenceMaker just wouldn't be possible. Jackie Buckley, please. I know you don't like to do this.
Right here.
So let's a round of applause and a round of thanks. So now it's my pleasure to introduce my founding partner in the creation of DifferenceMaker, a real strong advocate for innovation, social change, and entrepreneurship at the university, in the city, and in the region, and someone I've had a pleasure of working with for a very long time, Chancellor Jackie Malone.
Welcome everyone. How's everybody doing? Great day today out there, huh? I hope some of you got to enjoy it. Some of us did not. Well, we enjoyed it, just not the good weather. It's really great to be back here at our 4th annual DifferenceMaker Celebration. I have to say, it's just hard to believe we are now in our 4th year of this fantastic event. And you think about, not that long ago, DifferenceMaker honestly was literally a twinkle in our eyes. We were very much encouraged. As you've heard the story, and I'm just going to go into it a little bit because we do have some special guests. Hi, John. Oh, all the way from Florida. Nice timing. Good job. We do have some special guests this evening who I'd like to just introduce and welcome. First, Ron Insana. This is his return visit. He is just a famous celebrity, CNBC commentator, and of course tonight, of all nights, with what happened in the stock market today, he's going to help us to understand and advise us all. You know, it's kind of serendipitous that, Ron, you don't know this, but the last time you were on campus, and I came to this event, it was the night before my inauguration. My inauguration started the next morning, very early in the morning. And it was a week kind of like this one, when we had all our great friends, these wonderful alums joining us. Thank you again for coming here. All of our Floridian friends, Ed Gallagher, thank you from Comcast for bringing these great guests. All of you, Jen, Jeff, you've been amazing. Thank you for your support, Lorna, all the way from New York City. But you know, so here we were, just a short time ago, and 3 years ago. And I came to this event, and I thought, I really have to leave early, because I've got a long day tomorrow. You don't get inaugurated very often, and in my lifetime, trust me, you know, it was just kind of like a dream. So here we were. This man walks in, takes the room by control. We're all mesmerized. There was no way I could leave when Ron Insana was here speaking. And to watch our students just absolutely electrified by his comments. We were grateful then. We're so grateful and humbled that you would join our university tonight. So thank you, Ron, again for being here. We have another special guest this evening. Again, thanks to Ed Gallagher, the Senior Vice President and General Manager at Comcast, a very special and important alum to UMass Lowell. He's also been able to, I'm not sure how he did it yet, he hasn't shared that one. I mean, it's a little bit like getting Oprah. No, we won't go there. But kind of at that level, our special guest this evening, Dean Kamen. Thank you for joining us tonight. Segue and all those things, great entrepreneurial spirit that he has. So I think it's just very special that all of you are joined together, our alumni these distinguished celebrities, all of you as students who have done so much to build the Difference Maker program. And again, I started out by saying Difference Maker was really just kind of a hope for us. And we thought about it a lot, and we thought about how do we build a program that takes who we are as a university, what differentiates us as a university. And we have done a lot of soul searching. Here we are, a public university. Did I mention? Oh, we're the 10th fastest growing university in the country. Did I mention that? Our rankings and our star is rising like you can't imagine. And we believe a big part of that is that we tapped into our legacy, who we are as a university, and a big part of that is this very practical, applied, entrepreneurial approach to education. That's what Difference Makers is all about. Difference Makers is about taking our students, by the way, 30% of our students, their family household income is less than $30,000. Many of our students are first generation college students. Having said that, 95% of our students, when they graduate, are fully employed or going to great graduate schools. Why? You're going to find something out about that tonight. It's because of the great education that they get here. It's because of these incredibly talented academic leaders, these faculty who work tirelessly to push our students to the edge. It's about the community that we have here. It's about the students who are pushing each other. I look out at them and I look at these Difference Maker projects that they have conceptualized from nothing. Our students, their biggest challenge is figuring out how to take a risk. Why? Well, they're practical, they're hardworking, they got the whole package. What's a challenge for them is how to take a risk. Why? Well, like I say about my kids, they have me. I'm their plan B. These young people and this next generation of students, now I like to say, they have us. We're their plan B. We are helping them to take these chances, to think outside the box, to create an idea, to take it to the next level, test it, try it, and hopefully start their own business. And if they don't, that's okay. Because in the meantime, they have gotten experiences that they will never forget. I was talking with Brian Risk here, my good friend tonight, who's about to announce a very incredibly generous gift to the university. Thank you, Brian Risk, for that. And I asked him, because I'm curious, you know, what helps you to give back? What makes you think about making a difference? And I asked him about his first experience, and he shared that. And I think about Difference Makers is that first really important moment for our students when they figure out they can have an idea and they can make a difference, and the rest of us are here to support them in doing so. So thank you all for your important support of Difference Makers. Thank you to our faculty, our administrators. Thank you, Steve Tello, for having the courage to push this forward. Thank you, most importantly, to our students who show great courage every day, applying themselves to this university, distinguishing yourself. And oh, by the way, I just have to say, when Dean Kamen came in tonight, do you know what the first thing he said to me was? Oh no, it wasn't Jackie, you're doing a great job there. Oh, which I do like to hear on occasion, but that's okay. No, you know what he said? What I hear from CEOs around the company and around the world. Do you know what he said? I want more of your students. Congratulations to all of our students. Thank you, Dean. Thank you both for being here. I love our alumni. Thank you so much. Thank you.
How can't you win with a boss like that? thank you very much, Chancellor. We really appreciate your support and your encouragement, and you're willing to take risks with us, and so thank you for that. Now, we do have a lot to do tonight, so basically the agenda for the evening, we're going to do a panel with some students and some mentors and some alumni, and my good friend Holly Butler is going to lead that panel. And then we're going to spend some time, we give Ron the podium, and he's going to share some insights on, and I can't quite tell you what he's going to talk about, but I know based on our last visit, it was really engaging. You don't know either. I did want to thank Ron, though. He was really generous with his time. Came in last night, spent some time with Dean Richtermeyer, with the DifferenceMaker team. Today he visited with campus. He did a special class with our business school students over in Alumni Hall, toured the Innovation Hub, the Medical Device Incubator, so we really appreciate you taking that time. So now I do want to call up my good friend and colleague, Holly Butler. I don't know if you all know, but Holly is actually a double Riverhawk, right? She has her marketing and finance degree from the Manning School of Business. She was one of those brave students who went through the Master of Science in Innovation Technology Entrepreneurship, and now she's actually working on her PhD. And Holly has worked with me side by side with DifferenceMaker, and as I take on new responsibilities here at the university, I'm really very happy and honored to be able to give this baby to her to grow and to bring it to the next generation. So Holly, why don't you come on up? And while the panel is coming up, I just wanted to touch on a few highlights. So we mentioned the student teams, and I know one of the things folks always want to know is how is that team doing? Well, today, Brian and Ron had a chance to meet Erin Keeney from NonSpec. NonSpec was our first campus-wide DifferenceMaker team. NonSpec has on the market an adjustable prosthetic limb that they can sell for less than $100. That company, they are actually selling that device in India, and they've now opened an organization in Rwanda that'll be manufacturing the device. They've raised $800,000. So we made a $5,000 campus-wide DifferenceMaker investment in them. They've gone on to raise $800,000 through grants, through partnerships, and they've been working with the Indian government, and they're working in Rwanda now. So that's one team. Another team you may recall is Invisaware. Invisaware, Raja and Ray, two engineers, had an idea for an emergency alert device for women. So they were sitting in their college student seat, and Raja talked about her fear walking around campus or walking in the city, you know, as a woman alone. So what they engineered was a little device. And Raja, who, those of you who met her, she's a very stylish, well-dressed young woman. She wasn't wearing any tacky, help me, I've fallen, I can't get up bracelet. So what they have done is developed a pendant that actually fits on a bracelet. It's a stylish piece of jewelry that interfaces with a smartphone. And in an emergency, this little pendant that sits on your Alex and Ani bracelet, you clip it, it dials out, it'll dial 5 numbers. Now, Raja was going to be here this evening, but they're at a real estate trade show, a national real estate trade show in Long Beach, California, because what they realized is the market is much bigger than just college students. And so those folks have gone on to raise about $500,000. Both of those teams actually received some Launch and Lowell funding, about $100,000. And we also are looking at Riverhawk investment funds. So that's just 2 examples. And then the third example, as you never know where an innovation is going to go, I have to share, is Topicare. Any of you who were judges when Topicare came up to the podium will remember the product we love to hate. And what Topicare was, it's a plastic ashtray. And the young man said, Holly, I'm blanking on his name. What's that? Justin. Justin came to us, he said, listen, his pitch was, listen, people still smoke. There were no ashtrays in cars. So what happens? Those cigarettes get thrown out the window. So what Justin came up with, he was a plastics engineer, an ashtray snaps on top of a soda can, has a little hole, sits in the drink holder. Now there was some angst amongst the judges, you know, about this, but he was ready to go to market. So we seeded him $4,000, first to market. Justin sold out his first 80,000 units in Walmarts across the country, and he has another 80,000. He's about to buy the factory in Nashua where they manufacture the device. So that's just sort of a snapshot of some of the winners. I do want to give a shout out to my friend Teresa Scholl in the back room. Teresa, wave your hand. Teresa started SOS, Support Our Students. And Support Our Students is one of those student organizations that took root. What we came to learn about was this issue of hunger among students. And it's not something that we think about or we're necessarily aware of, but if you're a residential student, right, you have a meal plan, there's no issues. But as the Chancellor mentioned, 30% of our students are making they come from a family with a median income under $30,000. They live at home. They deal with issues that many of us don't deal with. So Teresa and her team started an organization called Support Our Students that worked with Aramark, a major corporation, to create a donate a meal plan. So when our freshmen come to campus, they have meal plans, they donate a meal, and there's a meal bank now that students can get a card. So if they have these issues, they don't have to make a big scene about it. They get a meal card, and they have meals now. And so there's a whole range of really successful things that make a difference in people's lives that these students, with your support, with your mentorship, have made possible. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my good friend, Holly Butler.
Thank you. All right, thank you all for coming and joining us this evening. We have 3 DifferenceMaker student teams up here representing, as well as 2 alumni, mentors, and judges. So I'm just going to start by introducing everybody, and then we'll do some Q&A, and then open up to the audience for questions as well. So first, I would like to introduce Richard Jukanardian. He is a Zuckerberg College of Health Sciences grad from '98, and he is currently the Vice President of Centen. And next, we have one of our students, Roma Aurora, who we're happy to have back. She actually is one of the co-founders of Project Starfish, which was a company a couple years ago. She's a recent alumni in the Manning School of Business, and she had won $4,500 at our DifferenceMaker Idea Challenge in 2017. And next up, we have Craig Kelly. So Craig is currently the president of Team Enable. He is a senior in the Francis College of Engineering, and his team won the campus-wide DifferenceMaker Idea Challenge Award, which was $6,000. And next up is Gary Ainsworth. So Gary is a graduate of '87 in the Kennedy College of Sciences, and he is currently a principal consultant at Arc Completa, Inc. And last but not least, we have back Danielle Thibodeau, and we're very excited to have her back as well. So she is the co-founder of Operation 250. She is also a recent alumni in Fine Arts, Community Social Sciences, Criminal Justice. And her team also won campus-wide DifferenceMaker, and that was in 2017. And that was a $6,000 award. So thank you all for joining me this evening on the panel. So Craig, I'm going to actually begin with you. So can you just explain a little more about Enable and how your project began?
Yeah, so there was this global movement called the Enable movement that's been going on for about 5 or so years now. And essentially the goal is to create open source prosthetics and assistive devices that can be created using 3D printing technology and given at no cost to recipients. So there's a lot of makers, individual people in their own basements who are creating these devices and come up with really awesome models. And we just saw the opportunity that college students, motivated college students, could come together, form a sort of business model at the college, and then have a bigger impact than these individuals were having in their basements. So we've come together over the past 5 years, been able to work and to create about 8 new novel prosthetic assistive devices, as well as working with about 15 recipients so far and continuing to grow.
That's an amazing cause. Thank you for sharing that. So going through the DifferenceMaker process, what primary resources were you able to leverage and use to further the Enable idea?
Yeah, so I always say the mentor program that came out of it was the absolutely biggest thing for us. So we went to the summer boot camp where we learned about forming our business model a little bit better, and by the end of it we were able to pair up with 2 mentors. So one was Anshuman, who had lots of experience starting up with startup companies and getting them just to focus on their business model. He was able to get us working on task management, project management, and able to just how to function and continue moving forward as a group. And the other was Brenda Mayo, who had a lot of experience in nonprofits, and she was just an amazing help in letting us figure out how to fundraise as a team and continue to grow and get the necessary funds to continue helping our recipients.
Excellent, thank you. And I know you got $6,000 from us, and you raised an additional about $15,000 to $20,000. So what have you been able to use that funding for?
Yeah, so obviously primarily we use these to create the prosthetic and the assistive devices for our recipients to give them back more function in their life. So it's just been this amazing opportunity, and on top of that we're able to provide new experiences for our members in our group. So just last weekend we were down in DC at a conference based around 3D printing prosthetics, and we were able to meet with other people in the community who have been doing similar work in Honduras and Colombia, as well as other parts of the US, and have this just amazing collaboration opportunity, learning about what other people in the community are creating, sharing the new devices that we've created, and just forming these bonds where we are now going to be able to have devices that can be tested in Honduras on different recipients that we would never have access to, and just continue to grow. And obviously the funds have worked to build up a little lab that we have in the makerspace over on Francis College of Engineering. We have dedicated 3D printers for ourselves and been able to afford the funds and the materials necessary to keep making these hands.
Excellent. So you had said you used some of your funding to build the 3D hands, and I know there's a great picture up on the screen of you actually delivering one of those hands to one of your recipients. So could you just share one of those experiences that you had actually delivering the prosthetic to the child?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple years ago, I was going over to Ireland to visit some of my family that lives over there. And by sheer coincidence, we got in contact with the recipient who ended up being about 20 miles or so away from my aunt's house. So we was like, okay, this is an amazing opportunity. So we created a prosthetic hand that was Tangled themed because that movie had just come out and she was a huge fan of it. So we put the little chameleon on the back of the hand, and we were able to go over and deliver her in hand this prosthetic device for her. And the instant she opened it up, you could see her face just light up. She put the hand on in a moment. She was running around the house. She was grabbing toys and stuffed animals and interacting with her own stuff in a way that she never had before. And I was talking to her mom, and then she would pull me away and bring her into her room, and she was just playing with her. She had a little cart that she could push around a dog on, and just interacting with these things in a new way, which is just amazing to see. But then about a week later, I arrived back home, and the mom had actually sent me an email, and she was saying, oh, well, Lily, she just went to school for the first time, and she started being so social with me. She wasn't talking as much, and she seemed just embarrassed. And we realized that she had gone to school, the other kids had noticed her limb difference, and they started making, pointing it out and being pretty mean about it. As you can imagine, some kids are pretty tough. They say what they feel, and it's awful. But after another week or so, Lily ended up taking her device to school, and she got in front of all these students and her teachers, and she talked about how she was different, and she understands that she's different, but it makes her special, and that she's working with other people to find new solutions to get back function, and this difference is something that makes her who she is, and gives us these really cool opportunities to see the world in different ways. And that's honestly the biggest thing that we've seen coming out of this, even more than the function that these devices can give to the recipients. It's just helping them to understand their limb differences, find their place within the world, and just grow and be able to talk about it more with their parents.
That's a great story. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, I'm going to move on to Danielle now. Thank you so much for coming back. So you're one of the co-founders of Operation 250, so you can just share with the audience what Operation 250 is.
Yeah, sure. So we actually came out of a competition hosted or sponsored by Facebook and the Department of Homeland Security, and that was about the fall of 2016, I believe. So from there, we did pretty well. We placed 3rd out of 50-something students nationwide. We were the top educational program. So through that process, we built an online platform that helps. Basically, what we focus on is to focus. So we focus on terrorism and online safety, and basically we do that through in-teacher training sessions. We go to schools and have student interventions. For that portion, we really focus on developing decision-making skills and critical thinking skills through the lens of terrorism and online safety. So that's where our focus is.
Excellent. I know you have your whole team and advisor over there with you as well, so it's a great project. So after winning that competition, you guys get involved in DifferenceMaker. So why did you choose DifferenceMaker?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. So the night after we did really well in that competition, we immediately, we know we have something, this is how do we make this better, how do we grow this? So that night we were sitting in our hotel in DC, and we were like, DifferenceMakers, like this is the answer. So it in the end, I think we did win the campus-wide DifferenceMakers, which comes with the 6,000. But I think more than that, it kind of allowed us to progress from that project and that mindset of just this is just a project to this is an actual nonprofit. Like we can make a difference, we can actually grow this. So I think that was huge coming us.
Thank you, and I know that you're matched to some mentors, and your advisor is Professor Shortland, who's also one of our fellows. So how have those people influenced you in being able to help you push Operation 250 forward?
Sure. I think I can probably speak for all of us when I say that we wouldn't be nearly as successful or probably even exist without Dr. Neil Shortland. He kind of gave us the opportunity to exist, which has been awesome, and his guidance and his experience has been really invaluable to us, especially as of late. And so not only him, but we had support from a criminal justice graduate student who had been through that contest already. So we got a lot of advice from him, and of course DifferenceMakers, as I said before, just transitioning into being an actual nonprofit. Yeah, really great.
And I know since winning, you, as a team, have achieved a lot. And I know recently there's some exciting news. So if you don't mind sharing that, and then other achievements that your team has accomplished.
Yeah, so I guess the big one. So recently we found out, actually a few weeks ago, we found out that we won a National Institute of Justice grant for a little over $1 million. Be starting that soon. We're pretty excited about that. But previously, so we won campus-wide DifferenceMakers last spring, and then from there we hosted a conference here for students, for educators, for law enforcement and community partners. And so that was a huge success, kind of like showing, yes, there is a problem with the education, there's a gap in the education system, but like here's the solution, like we can help solve that problem. So that was huge, just for getting our name out there. And
then last question for you. So I know that you recently graduated and you just got a job with the Department of Justice. So has DifferenceMaker and your experiences with Operation 250 helped you in any way in that capacity?
For sure, yeah. I think every college student is looking for that one thing to make them stand out, to put their resume on top of the pile. And for me, this whole experience, including DifferenceMakers and everything, has certainly been that. I don't know if I would have gotten my foot in the door so quickly had it not been for this experience. So, great.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Danielle. You came all the way from New York, so thank you so much for joining us today. So you had won a couple years back. So can you please describe Project Starfish and what it is?
Sure. So Project Starfish is a smart software solution that's controlled by muscle movement, and we were able to use our solution for prosthetics and other medical devices.
And then, so that's obviously a really cool idea. So how did you define that specific problem and that solution?
So when we started, one of the co-founders, he had the software where he could read the software could read the muscle movement, and when we did research on where we could initially use this, we saw that when people have an amputation, the muscles are still active, and we could develop a 3D prosthetic that would be low cost and non-invasive, and with the muscle movement, that could work. And then as we went through the competition, and the boot camp and everything, we actually saw that our technology could be used for other medical devices other than just the prosthetic, because within the DifferenceMaker family we already had 2, and it's a pretty niche market for those prosthetics. So we were actually able to learn more about EMG sensors and other medical devices where we could use that technology.
Excellent. I know currently you're not working on your project, but you have a really cool internship in New York. And I know you work closely with alumni, Lorna Boucher, who's also been a judge for us, so we're very happy to have her this evening. So can you just talk a bit about how your involvement with DifferenceMaker helped align that position and your interest in that position?
So as Ali mentioned, our project is not currently active. All the members have to go to either grad school or, in my case, a job or internship, so we weren't able to continue, so we put it on hold until we all figure out what we're doing. So my experience with my internship, Lorna was actually one of the judges when I was presenting our idea, and there was a job that Dean Kamen mentioned over the summer that the internship was coming up. I had applied for it, and during my interview, as I forgot her name, but she mentioned that, you know, having DifferenceMaker on your resume really helps. And when Lorna and I were talking, that was like the first thing she remembered, and she remembered that she had seen it before, and we had met before. We met through advisory board meetings and DifferenceMaker, so it was really something that, you know, stood out to her, and seeing me present and everything, so it's really helped me. Yeah.
That's excellent. That's an amazing story. Steve Rogers and I actually had the pleasure of having lunch with Lorna a few weeks ago, and she had told us that story, and we thought that that was absolutely amazing. So thank you for sharing that. So you've been through the DifferenceMaker process, and now you have this great internship. So what did you learn in DifferenceMaker that you're now able to apply to your job?
So, I mean, just as a business student going through this process, it's amazing because putting into use what we learn is the most amazing process and the most amazing thing to do, because we actually learn things in our classes and we do that. And just, you know, small things like cross-communication, working in teams, and just how a small business goes through all those channels, and then seeing that in a bigger company, how those small steps become bigger steps, and how we can use all those changes, and just learning all those things. It's been a really interesting experience for me, and like using it in my real work, life, and everything. It's been really good.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing, Roma. And now, Richard, you've been involved in various aspects of DifferenceMaker throughout the years. So why did you choose to get involved in DifferenceMaker as a mentor? And I know you're working with College of Health Sciences currently. So if you could just share a bit about that.
Sure. I had the benefit of being first introduced to DifferenceMakers when I was doing some work with the Entrepreneurship for All, E4All program, where there was some cross-pollination between DifferenceMakers and E4All, and that was my first introduction. I think, you know, I'm not an idea guy. I'm a get things done guy. I'm a sustainable and, you know, scalability guy. So when I see the ideas that these individuals, the ingenuity behind what they're trying to do, the creative problem solving, the ability to wake up in the morning and say, there's a significant business challenge out there, or there's a significant social impact area that I can make a difference on because of my idea, but I need help. And to recognize, one, that they need help, which is really, really important. But then being able to tap into folks that can help bring their ideas to life, help them come into, you know, something that is real, allow them to think about how they can scale, allow them to think about how they can grow. Being able to help enable that, seeing, you know, because I don't have that idea, I have other opportunities that I can give. It's so satisfying to be able to see the ingenuity here and know that in some small way they can benefit from the experience that I have, which is a little different.
And I know you've been linked to a few different teams over the years, all health-based, Team Inspect and QBell and currently UMass Heartbeat. And I know your background's in healthcare. So how has your expertise in healthcare been able to help those teams push their ideas forward?
Sure. I mean, it goes without saying that healthcare is a very, very like many businesses and many industries, healthcare is a very complicated space to navigate, right? And if I can bring some benefit of my experience in that healthcare vertical to these teams, whether it be around regulatory or commercialization or policy, I'm really happy to do that because, again, a great idea in how to solve a healthcare problem is usually just a very small piece of a very complex sort of ocean to navigate, right? So I think hopefully I can help bring that benefit to these folks.
Thank you. And then I know that you've been able to financially support us in some of our events. So what do you see in DifferenceMaker that enables you to
I mean, I'll go back to what I think many other folks have said. It is that Difference Makers has found a way to take students who have that idea and who have that courage to bring that idea forward, and then give them a path and give them an opportunity to express that idea and bring that idea to fruition. And that to me is just so inspiring, right? So any way that, as like many people in this room, any way that you can be supportive of that is what drives my decision to do that.
Great, thank you, Richard. And last but not least is Gary. So Gary, again, you've been involved in DifferenceMaker in various capacities. So why did you get involved in DifferenceMaker, and what interested you in your involvement?
Well, I've been involved for about 2 years. I originally found out from the New Venture Initiative and Nancy Saucier, and working with that group, and I wanted to get involved with that and DifferenceMaker to get a little more involved earlier in the process and work with students. And again, I tend to be more of the operational, technical focus. So working with people with vision and visionaries, it's really quite exciting.
And so DifferenceMaker hosts 3 college-based competitions each year. Jim Regan from DCU hosts the Managerial Business DCU Innovation Contest. We have a Francis College of Engineering Prototyping Competition, and then we have a Fine Arts, Social Sciences, Creative Venture Competition. So Gary was kind enough to actually put on a workshop this year for all the Francis College of Engineering students. So can you talk a bit about that workshop and why you thought that was important for the students?
Well, as an alum, I really wanted to give something back. I really love this school and wanted to get involved. And I found this was a great way for me to start getting more active in this community. I believe that the workshop's going to focus on something really fundamental, marketing and product requirement documents. And these are really foundational aspects of product development. And typically after the eureka moment, you actually have to start making hard decisions. So these are really straightforward tools, and that can be taught and shared with new teams as well as existing teams. Ultimately to save time and money. And really my hope is that it'll enable the teams to be able to develop more focused and targeted products that ultimately will make the customers happier.
And we truly appreciate that, so thank you so much. And so that's going to be it for the panel now. I want to make sure that we kind of stay on track a little bit with the time. So now we can open up to audience Q&A. Any questions for our student team representatives or our alumni mentors and judges? Yes.
Sure. So there's this company called the Adventure Partners, and every year they, recently they create a competition. So it's through a competition that is sponsored through Facebook and the Department of Homeland Security. So we won some funding, and we're able to go to DC through that. So it was more of a competition, not so much that we ourselves were sponsored by them.
Other questions? Yes.
I just have a general question for everyone, but my question really is, what if I have an idea, because all the stories we really thought were for some kind of a physical product. What if we have an idea for something, for instance, my idea would be related to something with immigration and helping immigrants in this country with really anything, but what if we had an idea along the lines of that? Would DifferenceMaker be able to help us with that as well?
Yes, so DifferenceMaker, we help students of all different ideas, all different problems across campus. So I know Dr. Tello had mentioned earlier that Teresa Schroll is here. She developed the Support Our Students platform. So anything from product-based teams to nonprofit teams, service-based teams, we're here to help you. And I know you're actually brothers with Roma, siblings. So we're happy to talk to you after the event, or maybe meet with you. Maybe you can get involved in one of our college competitions, and if not, the big $50,000 idea challenge. So, good question. Any other questions? Yes?
I'm gonna say, what's the most effective way to build a team of people outside of your major?
I know for us, we focus, so obviously we get lots of engineering interest in our group. We're creating mechanical devices pretty often, but we focus a lot on trying to get in people from the health sciences field as well as the business fields. As far as effective manner, I'd say the biggest thing is really showing the motivation and the drive for your own business model. And so whether that's just going to South Campus or whatever the other campus of what you're focusing on, going there, going to like the club fair and events like that, and really just driving, showing your passion, having tabling events, things like that, I think is really the most impactful way to show that you show your interest in what you're doing and try to get others involved with that.
And just to add to that, maybe talking to faculty members and taking a couple of minutes of, in the beginning of class and presenting your idea, because that's how my teammates and I met. Someone told a professor and then they communicated to us. So just going to classes, talking to professors because they are the best resource.
Anyone else?
Hello. Oh, hi.
Oh,
Over here.
over here. Oh,
Sorry. Dan, yeah, just one quick question that I think might be interesting. As well as difference makers, Operation 250 got a lot of support from the school and also from the wider UMass Lowell alumni network. So obviously we have Frank Spinoza over there, we have Roger Cressy, who played a huge part in our growth. Could you quickly talk about how those networks also kind of paved the way for what we've done since as well, and maybe give some advice to kind of other teams around how they can do that?
Yeah, so we met Roger Cressy when we were out in DC on that competition, and he was nice enough to meet with us and talk about what we were doing, and same with Mr. Frank Spinoza, and we're very gracious to our donors. But I think the biggest thing is to just get yourself in the room. You don't have to necessarily wind up with money, but I think the more people you can attract to your idea, the better. And if they don't give you money, try somebody else. But I think, yeah. I think more important than money is just getting the buy-in. Like even if you don't wind up with a dime, I think if you get their support and validation, I think that's really huge. So I think that's probably been the biggest thing for us, is just to share our idea and say like, hey, yeah, you have something, and it doesn't have to be money, but just like advice, like here, like this can make it better, things like that. But yeah, it's just like get yourself in the room. That's probably the most important thing. Any other questions?
So, for me, a person who does not currently have any ideas, is there any way that I could help support all these people who have ideas that can really help change things? Is there a way that I can get involved in Difference Maker and meet people in a way that I can help them, even though I don't have any ideas?
Yeah, that's a great question. So even if students don't have ideas, we have a lot of teams that are open to getting additional teammates. I know Enable has a club meeting time where they welcome new students in. We have an online platform that we can help you with. So Han and I can definitely help you get involved even if you don't have an idea. So, all right, so we're just, yeah.
Actually, every team has multiple roles too. So maybe your strengths are missing in a team. I know, for example, the team I'm working with currently are really looking for one role, and they're having difficulty recruiting. So, go to your strengths, go to these meetings, and introduce yourself, and perhaps you can contribute.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank our panelists. I know everyone's eager to listen to right, so I hope that everybody enjoyed hearing more from some of our alumni judges and mentors, as well as some of our active difference maker teams. So I have the pleasure of introducing Ron Insana this evening. I know everybody is very excited to hear from him. We had dinner last night, and we spent the whole day touring UMass Lowell, the Innovation Hub, and our medical device incubator. So thank you again for coming, and Ed Gallagher from Comcast for sponsoring him. Thank you so much. Ron Insana began his career in 1984, and he joined CNBC in 1991. He's written several books, including Trend Watching, How to Avoid Wall Street's Next Fads, Manias, and Bubbles, as well as several other books. And he was nominated for a News and Documentary Emmy Award as part of NBC's coverage of 9/11, which we actually heard about the story. He was at Ground Zero when everything was happening, so that's pretty amazing. And he started his own hedge fund called Insana Capital Partners. He's also well known for his high-profile interviews, including Presidents Clinton and Bush, billionaire Warren Buffett, which we also got to hear some more details about, which was a lot of fun, and more. And he's currently a senior business analyst and commentator on CNBC, and we are so excited to have him tonight. So thank you for being here once again.
Very much. I really appreciate that kind introduction. That picture, by the way, is about 15 years and 30 pounds ago, so please just to be clear, I was actually not the university's first choice to be speaking to you tonight. Ed Gallagher tried to get Jim Cramer, but tonight's Jim's medication holiday, so thank you very much. Thank you. Before I get going, I would like to welcome a special guest who himself is quite the entrepreneur, quite the inventor, more patents than Thomas Edison. He has the iRobot wheelchair, the Loop prosthetic arm, also, as you well know, the inventor of the Segway, and is now working on mass-producing human organs with 3D printers, organ regeneration processes that may very well revolutionize the healthcare industry, and in many ways is adjacent to what some of you young folks are trying to get done in the healthcare space as well. So let's, if you wouldn't mind, get a few words from Dean Kamen, who in addition to all that, has created the Olympics of the Mind with First and First Global, which is a robotics competition that invites teams from 191 countries around the world to compete every year in engineering and robotics, and it's making an enormous impact on STEM-related education and that process that is so desperately needed given the skills gap that we have in this country. So please, Dean, if we come up and just say a few words, if you don't mind.
This wasn't in the script. No. But as your chancellor said, I'm here for one reason. I'm recruiting. I have slightly over 500 now. I guess it's getting closer to 600 engineers up in Manchester. I've got 100 open positions. We need electrical, mechanical, systems, controls, material science, computational. Pretty much, if you're an analytic thinker, I need you. But as she pointed out, this institution is pretty renowned for its plastics engineering. I need a few of those. Some of my very, very best long-term project managers are people that graduated from here. I've always thought of this as a great engineering school. The only thing the kids that show up from here don't have that some come from the neighboring engineering schools have. What you guys don't have is an attitude. I'm serious when I say that. I think it's becoming an epidemic. I think people have realized how powerful an education is. A lot of kids get their education and they use it as a weapon. I think it ought to be a tool. And I think kids that are lucky enough to be in that ethereal group that really get a great education, which is a very small group compared to the 8 billion people out there, most of whom are not very well educated. You've gotta understand it's a tool that you use to give back. I saw a lot of the projects you're working on, problems you're trying to solve, make a difference. I would strongly urge all of you to remember that once you have an education, it's a tool you can solve a lot of problems. In fact, technology in particular is getting so good that you can solve almost any problem technically. The problem used to be, what can I do with technology? Now the problem is, what should I do with technology? And I see a lot of kids get great educations and solve problems that don't matter because they're quick or they're easy or they think there's a quick business win out of it. In fact, I bet this guy hears at least what I do, but I have kids, and I kid you not from this place, come in and they tell me their exciting project they're going to do. Not like the ones we saw. And within 2 minutes, they'll typically tell me, here's their exit strategy. Maybe that's a word coined down the road in the business school, I don't know, but I'm tired of hearing it. I tell these kids, I got a great idea. If your whole goal is to get out of that business quickly, I can solve your problem. Don't go into it. We all have the same exit strategy. Trust me, I'm not in any rush to get there, but we're all going to the same place. Pick a really big problem, something that you're so passionate about. The last thing you think about is getting out of it. The world needs a lot of smart people to be focused on the right things. And I hope this institution keeps reminding those kids that that's what they've got to do. By the way, the really tough problems, ones where you don't have any exit strategy, the reason they're tough is we've been around a few thousand years making history. And all the easy problems have been solved. You know, fire, water, movable type, the TV clicker. I mean, they've done all the important stuff. That's easy. There's a lot of really tough problems out there. I spent most of my life on them. Ron was very gracious in pointing it out, but it's true. We received last year an $80 million contract from the federal government, the Department of Defense. We got matched by over $200 million from industry to create a scalable solution to replacing human organs. That is a non-trivial problem. But if we can do it, we will transform medicine in two fundamental ways. People will be a lot healthier if you can solve their problem instead of chronically treat it. Dialysis. And oh, by the way, if you can solve somebody's problem instead of chronically treating it, the cost of it, which will otherwise bankrupt the country, goes away. A single issue, kidney function, dialysis, it's $100 billion a year. It's 20% of the healthcare expenditures of the United States on 1.4% of the people that need health care. When you start adding the other chronic conditions we deal with, we're either going to solve these problems or they're going to bankrupt us. So I need about 100 of you right now to help me solve these problems. I'm confident your chancellor will prepare you for the challenge, and you should come see me. In the meantime, you came to hear Ron, so.
From my experience, for those who, I remember going back to my alma mater in Southern California, and at one point we had a group of us who had graduated, who some of us were in a position to offer jobs. And we were not approached. It was a master's level class, and no one talked to us. If you guys don't take advantage of this moment that you just had, it'll be a very large mistake in your life. Working for somebody like Dean is a world-class opportunity, so if you get the shot, take it. And that's something I'd like to talk about. So going back, before I even get into my history, which Holly touched on a bit, what I like to do, before I kind of get into the meat of the matter, is also bring you up to date on the news. As Chancellor noted earlier, the Dow was down 831 points today. Pretty rough environment. I mean, it's not historic in the sense that to do what happened on October 19th, 1987, which was something that I covered early in my career, which was at the time, and still is in many ways, the biggest stock market crash we ever suffered. That was a nearly 23% decline in a single day, 507 points from 2,200 down to 732. in a single session. To do that today, it would be 10 times that size. It would be a 5,000 point decline. So 800 points a day is 3%, still within the realm of semi-normal day. Bad day, but not outside the bounds of normality. As we look into tonight's news feed, which is, again, as it's been for the last several days, somewhat quick and somewhat daunting, it does appear that Robert Mueller is going to indict Jared Kushner and Don Jr. tomorrow morning, and so the Dow futures are down an additional 800 points tonight. So expect a rough day. It's actually not true, I'm just making sure you're with me. One of the things you learn about being on television is if you say anything with an authoritative voice, people will believe you. I got my start in 1984 at Cal State Northridge. For those of you who are college students today, when I was at that state school in Southern California, our tuition was $90 a semester when we started, $350 when we graduated, and you can't believe the amount of complaining that happened because tuition quadrupled during our time at the school. And today it's about $13,000 a year. It's still like University of Massachusetts Lowell, one of the best, not only kept secrets, but one of the greatest deals in return on investments that you could possibly get anywhere in the educational landscape today. And having a 20-year-old in college, I would love to send not only her, but my other two coming up the ladder over here as well, and actually put some money away for retirement. That's not going to happen. But when I graduated, yes, exactly. I graduated with a film degree in 1984, and upon graduation, neither Steven Spielberg nor George Lucas bothered to call. So, without gainful employment, a friend of mine from high school got me a job at the Financial News Network, which in 1984 was relatively new cable operation. For those of you who aren't entirely familiar with cable TV history, CNN started in 1979, ESPN started in 1979, Financial News Network, which was the forerunner to CNBC, started in November of 1981. And a good buddy of mine from high school had started there a couple months before I graduated, and he got me an entry-level position at FNN as a production assistant ripping wire. Back when we had paper wires that came off the rolls, ripping scripts, which were on paper. We used IBM Selector typewriters. There were no computers, virtually no video capabilities whatsoever. It was a pretty, in some senses it was lean, but we were in about 12 million American homes at the time, half on cable. And for those of you who are older and recognize this, I know some of you were with me earlier today, so I'm repeating myself. Some of the other carriage was on UHF stations around the country, the ultra-high frequency stations that competed with 2, 4, and 7 in your local market. And so it was a rather loose arrangement that we had as far as our distribution was concerned. And so we kind of struggled along. In October of 1984, I had been there 4 months, standing at the wires, handing out scripts, occasionally getting coffee. And my executive producer came up to me and said, "Remember what I told you I needed you next week?" "No, I don't need you next week." And he let me go. And I went back to the vitamin store where I worked in college, and my friend Casey and the rest of the crew, a week later, found out that they were laying off 95% of the editorial staff in a massive cutback to go break even. We were taking in $500,000 a month, spending $1 million. So they fired almost everybody. They kept Bill Griffith and Sue Herrera, who are both still on CNBC today. They kept my friend Casey as a producer and let almost everybody else go, and then operated on pretty much a skeleton staff, doing 8 hours of live business TV a day. Bill and Sue were the only 2 anchors left. So they ad-libbed roughly 8 hours of live business television between them every single day. A few months after I left, my friend Casey called me back, asked me if I wanted his job as a producer back at Financial News Network, so I went. Bill and Sue, by May of 1985, I came back in February, had been on the air 6 months straight, doing 8 hours of live TV a day, ad-libbing the bulk of it. They both called in sick on the same day. And an enterprising young producer gave me my first chance to go on air, read a couple of updates. The fact that I was that producer is probably immaterial for the purposes of this conversation. There was really no one else in the room, so I got to do a couple of updates. 3 months after that, I had a full-time job as an anchor on Financial News Network at age 24 with another co-anchor that they'd hired. So I had no economics experience whatsoever, no broadcast news experience. So at age 24, I was on the air, not knowing what I was doing and not knowing what I was saying. For those of you who watch cable television today, not a lot has changed. But it became a passion project. We were talking about stuff that was a little bit out there. We were trying to translate the language of Wall Street into the language of Main Street, and that was our charge, and that's what we tried to do. And it became actually a passion of mine to try to learn this in a manner that, even in the small cult audience environment that we had, we were able to explain why Wall Street meant something to Main Street, and ultimately how Washington policy played into that as well. A couple years after I'd been on the air, I was out visiting a friend of mine in Chicago who was going to medical school at Northwestern, a kid I'd known since 7th grade. And I went out to stay with him for a week, and I asked Bill Griffith, largely because I wanted to write off the trip, but I asked him if I could do a live report on a show that we did every week with the Chicago Board Options Exchange, and I was going to take an options trading class as well. And so he let me do it, and I walked out on the floor of the CBOE on Monday morning, October 19th, 1987, to do my one live hit, which was the day of the largest single stock market crash in history of the United States. My first live reporting experience was from the 3 exchanges in Chicago during the week of the crash, and I went from the CBOE to the Merck to the Board of Trade all week long, and actually had access to all those floors. And if you were operating out of New York in 1987, you couldn't get cameras on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange back then. That was a later innovation that we developed at the CNBC in the early to mid 1990s. So it was an extraordinary experience. It was an extraordinary learning experience. Again, right place, right time type of experience for me. Alan Greenspan had just become chairman of the Federal Reserve in August of 1987, when the Dow Industrial Average hit its all-time high for that cycle, which, anybody have any idea where that was? It was 2722 on the Dow. Roughly where the S&P trades today, 1/10 of where the Dow was up until this morning. And we sold off 507 points in a single day, almost 23%. And the Fed snapped into action, cut interest rates dramatically, flooded the system with money, and backstopped the banks, the brokers, and the specialists. And we survived that experience. And that became a pattern for Fed policy for the next 30 years, that every time we had a marketplace disruption, the Fed would intervene dramatically and try to quarantine Wall Street so that it didn't affect Main Street. And I've spent a lot of years talking about that because I think in many ways it's kind of a seminal event in the kind of market economy that we have today. That while from time to time gets a little unwieldy, is less regulated or more regulated in different periods, less than, soon to be less again. But you then have these panics that grip Wall Street. Sometimes they affect Main Street. They didn't after 1987, and rarely had up until this most recent crisis when we had the credit bubble burst and the real estate bubble burst simultaneously. We were all levered to the same asset class. That prompted the Fed this time around to go to 0 on interest rates, engage in some pretty unconventional monetary policies which are being unwound today and are partly responsible for the sell-off we're seeing lately. Yield on the 10-year note yesterday hit 3.25%. That's up from 1.36% at the low of the cycle. So we've gone up effectively 200 basis points, 2 full percentage points off the lows. When you're coming off 0, coming off 1%, that's a pretty big delta. And so the market may be more sensitive to it than prior cycles where it took us to get to like 5 or 6% before the market cracked. And so we're in the middle of this unwind. And in addition to having spoken about that in the last several years, I've also talked in a much different way than President Trump does about an idea around Fortress America. That in the last several years, we've had a huge number of salutary events, some of which Dean is involved with, some of which happened outside this area of the country, that have really reshaped the U.S. economy in meaningful ways. Back in 2008, in the midst of the crisis, we were also dealing with oil prices that were $147 a barrel. And we were having conversations about peak oil, that we would not see any incremental increases in oil production. In fact, most fields were being drawn down. And then from 147, we were likely to go to 200. If there was a Middle East experience, we could go to 250. Gas could go to $4 or $5 or $6 a gallon. And just as that was happening, the fracking revolution began to really take hold, and ultimately drove oil prices as low as $26.05 in February of 2016. Now they've rebounded since, but that's also allowed for a rebound in U.S. fracking activity. So we're now producing more oil than Saudi Arabia. We're about to produce more than Russia. We produce more natural gas than Russia and have for the last 2 years. We're exporting refined crude products. We're exporting crude oil to the Middle East, ironically. And we have the possibility of exporting natural gas, assuming we don't go into a full-blown trade war with China, to China, Japan, and other countries where our trade deficit could disappear in a minute, irrespective of what the president's doing on the trade front. If we just sold more energy and agricultural products around the world, we wouldn't have a trade deficit at all. And a lot of this has to do with the fracking revolution, which has led to a bit of a manufacturing renaissance in the U.S., partly because oil field jobs have gone up, although there's a huge shortage of, let's say, truckers in the fracking world. For those of you who are looking for a quick job that pays $120,000, trucking pays $100,000 in around the Permian basis, Eagle Ford, Bakken, all that kind of stuff. Huge shortage of truckers in the United States. But this manufacturing renaissance is also being fueled by wage competitiveness in the United States and a very low cost of energy. Natural gas at $3 per 1,000 cubic feet is a quarter of what it costs in Europe and about an eighth of what it costs in Asia. So we are seeing some manufacturers come to the US because of that, not because necessarily of current trade policies, but because it's getting cheaper and cheaper here to produce things. And as many of you know, when you put ideation and production closer together again, which is something that we've not done for 30 years, you create efficiencies. You don't have time zone problems, you don't have shipping problems and costs associated with manufacturing overseas. And then we've had the technological revolution. Dean's been at the forefront of that, whether it's in healthcare, 3D printing used in manufacturing, 3D printing used in healthcare. We've had the development of social media networks. The iPhone is only 10 years old, if you can possibly imagine that after the internet bubble burst in 2000, people were talking about not seeing a killer app for another generation. 5 years later, we got the iPod, then the iPad, and then the iPhone. As a proud owner of 3 millennial children, I have had firsthand experience with the rapid revolution in communications technologies in my household. My oldest daughter, in the last 6 years, has sent or received 384,000 Snapchats in that period. Same 3 facial expressions. Turn out to the left, turn out to the right. Pursed lips they call duck face. I don't understand any of this. It got to the point where she had a sleepover with one of her friends when she was still in high school, and they were texting each other in bed when I walked in. And so I immediately confiscated the phones and said, you have to talk to each other. You're laying in bed, face to face. And I was walking out of the room, and she said, you text mom when you're in bed. And I said, that's different. I'm in another room. That's none of your business. For the record, my wife hates that joke. But we've seen this kind of rapid revolution in communications. The social media networks, whether it's Facebook, they all have their attendant problems. They can be used, as we know now, for good or ill. But it's been an extraordinary transformation. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when you're looking at AI, machine learning, robotics. And there's a difference of opinion as to whether or not this is going to create more or destroy more jobs in the future. I suspect it will create more that we haven't even thought of yet. That's kind of the Ray Kurzweil, Peter Diamandis, Dean Kamen view. Vidya Bhagwa, who I was with the other night, suggested quite the opposite, that we're going to kill more jobs and we're going to have a job boom for 5 years and then everything's going to go to hell. So, there are people who disagree with that perception, but if you look back in history, every new technological innovation has created more jobs than it's destroyed. And that goes all the way back to fire, through the cotton gin, through manufacturing and industrial revolution. Yes, industries go away. There are no buggy whips. Family farms have all but disappeared. We have huge agricultural combines in the United States that produce more food than we actually need. So productivity enhancements are going to be extraordinary. Some of the things Dean's talking about, when you start getting into longevity issues, it's been said that the first person to live to 150 has been born among the millennials. That has huge implications, not just for work and life, broadly speaking, but for entitlement programs. I'm a tail-end baby boomer. My mandated retirement age is 67. If I lived to 150, I'd be retired for 83 years. And as much as I love daytime TV, not a chance. And so, there's something like 700 reality shows on television, 680 of which deal with the Kardashians. There is no way on God's green earth you can just keep watching that stuff over and over again. But this has enormous implications for our country, which is at the forefront, and other countries who are suffering from demographic issues that we also don't have. The U.S., as a developed nation, has much better demographics than most other countries in the world. When you add the millennials, Gen Z, my kids, and Gen X, and Gen Y in the middle, you have 144 million people. And you have 77 million baby boomers who are aging out. We have this population barbell in the United States. It doesn't exist in Japan. They're dying faster than they're replacing people. China has an enormous demographic problem, not enough young men in the workplace, and certainly not enough women to reproduce at an appropriate pace. We've had a bit of a lull in the birth rate in the United States. It's at a 70-year low, but that's largely because of millennials put off family formation because of the financial crisis. And that's starting to turn, and we're starting to see a little bit of a pickup in that. But when you look at Europe, it's aging rapidly. China has a problem, Japan has a problem. The US doesn't have the same problem. And I suspect that as the millennials kind of do what the front end of the baby boomers did, we will see an echo boom that comes along that also helps to replenish the population. And up until recently, I would argue we also had, compared to the rest of the world, relative political stability. Now that's an open question in the current environment, right? I mean, as we all know from our daily tweet storms, it's a different environment than we're largely accustomed to. And it raises questions as to whether or not there will be some sort of policy mistake that sets us back, at least on a temporary basis. My longer-term view is quite optimistic, and I quote Warren Buffett all the time about how resilient the American economy is, and if you sell it short, it's generally been historically a very bad bet. That doesn't mean you can't have an interruption. And we as humans are capable of doing extremely stupid things from time to time, like world wars, like policy mistakes that are mammoth, whether it's on the trade front, the immigration front, and we know from the skills gap, we know from the labor shortage that we have in the United States, that some of the current policies are not terribly helpful. We have 6.6 million open jobs in the United States, and we have 6.3 million unemployed people. And among those unemployed, many of them don't have the requisite skills to go into some of these jobs, high-tech jobs. We have a shortage of agricultural workers, shortage of truckers, shortage of teachers, shortage of nurses that all pay reasonably well. And we now also have a shortage of immigrants. And not only is this administration going after illegal immigrants, they're trying to cut in half the number of legal immigrants who come into the country and cut down the H-1B visa program, which is brutal if you're in the tech sector. And so we're seeing this kickback and feedback already. And so you could see an interruption in economic growth because there's a very simple calculation for GDP, which is the size of labor force growth plus productivity growth equals GDP growth. And somehow we're going to come up short on that equation. And so as much as we might grow, getting a short-term sugar high, if you will, from the tax cut and the budget increases we've seen in the last year or so, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to grow 3, 4, or 5% in perpetuity. In fact, that might hit a wall in a relatively short period of time. And that might be some of what the market was sussing out today, is that we're seeing housing stocks and auto stocks slow down. Rising interest rates are cutting into that. We have labor shortages, production bottlenecks, kind of typical garden variety, end of business cycle type activity. So it's something that needs to be paid attention to. But again, it seems to be a short run issue. You know, longer term, again, betting against the end of the world has never really been a money-winning proposition. My friend Art Cashin, who was on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, talked about his experiences as a young man on Wall Street. He was training during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the instructor was asking these young men as they were getting ready to become brokers what they would do in the event of an altercation with either Cuba or Russia. And every guy raised his hand and said they'd sell stocks. And the teacher said, no, you should buy them. So if they fire the missiles, no one's going to fill your order. And if they don't, it's the buying opportunity of a lifetime. So, you know, betting on the end of the world works only once, and if you're right, you don't get paid. So it really doesn't make much sense. And we've had this sort of apocalyptic view in the post-crisis world that we're coming to the end of our rope. It's the end of days, the Mayan calendar. A couple guys had us going out on October 2011. And you still kind of get that feeling that somehow the U.S. is coming to a grinding halt, even though the president says, you know, things have never been better. And quite frankly, the economy has been as strong as we've seen in quite a number of years. It is pretty strong across the board. And so as a consequence, you know, there's no excuse to power forward except for policy mistake. The federal government, the Federal Reserve may raise interest rates too much, the trade war can go too far, and we could see a pullback of some sort. Italy can blow up. You know, we just don't know. We could also have geopolitical issues that we haven't yet, you know, identified, or if we have, they may not work out as well as we currently think. When you look at North Korea and Iran as two potential examples of that. But broadly speaking, and again, this kind of, you know, terminal notion, which was expressed for a period of time in some of the cable shows. There was a show called Doomsday Preppers several years ago on cable, where people were going into the woods with guns and canned food and, you know, kind of betting on the end of days. It was a fascinating concept, and if they were right, there would have been one episode. There were 5 seasons. So it didn't make a lot of sense at the end of the day when you think about that. So rather than drone on, I'd love to, you know, open this up for questions. I will go so far as to answer inquiries about the drastic and unfortunate 3-year period in which CNBC forced me to wear a hairpiece. I do talk about that publicly from time to time. That is a true story. It's therapeutic for me to discuss it, and as I look around the room, some of you could benefit from my experience. So I believe our microphone's moving around, so I'd love to chat and make this a little more interactive. I think there's a couple coming up. I think Steve.
I have a question.
I would have some mine, actually.
So you mentioned the H-1B visa issue, and we were chatting at lunch, and I told you how 25%, we were down, international graduate student enrollments were down 25% because of the rhetoric plus the enforcement of the immigration issues. So is there a way out of that? I mean, is it just a financial?
Yeah, mass education. Look, this is tough, and we've gone through these periods in the past. I went back in looking into what used to be called the Atlantic Monthly, that's now the Atlantic, and you could go really far back into the 1840s, 50s. The one article that I pulled that I keep in my desk is from 1895 by a gentleman named Francis A. Walker, who wrote in the Atlantic how we wanted to keep out kind of these low-level potential wards of the state from Italy, Poland, all of Eastern Europe, Russia, Jewish people, and really caustic, nasty terminology, kind of similar to what the president used in describing both Mexicans and Muslims. And so we have had these cycles where immigration has reached a peak in terms of the percentage of the population, which is where we are now, roughly 14%. We've seen those peaks in the past. And you've had these anti-immigration screeds and the notion that somehow, even at peak employment, there is someone who is taking your job. And we have more jobs than there are people looking for jobs. So no one is really, in that regard, disadvantaged. And some of the jobs that are available are jobs that second and third generation Americans never offer to do anyway. So if you talk to people in the agricultural community, you don't see a lot of college-educated kids going out to the Central Valley of California looking to pick strawberries for the summer. It just doesn't happen, you know. And those are jobs that typically go to first generation, you know, individuals who are looking to make their way. And so this notion that the other is somehow endangering us, when in fact quite the opposite's been true. Immigration has always enriched the country in a wide variety of ways, even to the point where illegal immigrants with fake Social Security cards pay into the Social Security fund and to the tune of about $7 billion extra every year that never gets repatriated home. So they're all there's a wide number of factors that refute all this, but during these periods, and we're seeing this actually worldwide, the refugee crisis that's ongoing in Europe as a result of the fall of Syria, Venezuela being a failed state, with 1 million% inflation that's now forecasted to be 10 million% next year. And that's such a meaningless statistic, but it actually means that you cannot spend your money faster than prices go up. Like Zimbabwe several years ago. I have at home, I have a $100 billion Zimbabwe note. It's worth like 1 fraction of 1 cent. You know, that's how bad inflation is in Venezuela. And you have Brazil now struggling internally, and they're looking to kind of a right-wing leader who's going to be in a runoff election at the end of the month. And you're seeing this take place. Steve Bannon, by the way, is traveling all over the world and consulting with these far-right candidates in Italy, in Eastern Europe, and in Brazil. And this period of economic nationalism has actually accelerated around the world, and also represents a risk to the economic outlook, because the worse this stuff gets, the more likely you are to end up in a shooting war, as we know from past history. So it's a risk. I don't understand it. You know, under some of the rules they're trying to establish today, 3 out of my 4 grandparents would never have qualified to come to the United States. And they're pretty good people. You know, I only knew 2 of them, and they were great. And you know, my grandfather, on my mom's side, started an Italian language newspaper in Niagara Falls, New York. But he would be hated for that today, because that's not really assimilating right away. Really bright guy, you know. And people have the same complaints about Telemundo and Univision. Those are all going to be English-speaking networks relatively shortly, because people assimilate, and it just happens, right? And so, I don't understand it. It's really bad. It's broadly bad social policy. It is particularly bad economic policy. But I think in the current environment, this is going to persist for a while until, I don't know what kind of rationality has to come around for people to see that it's a net plus, as it's always been.
So do you think price to earnings is, like in its current state of the economy, is being manipulated by stock buybacks? And if so, are you more focused on something such as like price to sales, which I've noticed are at levels that haven't been seen since like the tech bubble of like 1999 and 2000?
Yeah, valuations in the stock market have been a little rich, but there's been a lot of anomalous behavior with rates being as depressed as they've been over the last several years, you can basically run off of infinite price-earnings ratios as long as rates are close to zero. And inflation is under, 1 or 2%, where it's been up until recently. So PEs are being, to an extent, artificially inflated by the buybacks, $380 billion worth of buybacks in the first half of the year, I believe it was. And on pace, I think, to even do more than double that for the year. Companies can't buy stocks back right now because they're right around earnings reporting periods, so they have to hold off for 30 days during the reporting period. So that's partly also why the stock market may have sold off today. There's nobody at the end of the day to buy the stock. Companies can't buy it right now because they're in the window before reporting their earnings. There are two things that are distorting, for lack of a better term, earnings. If you don't have anything to do with the capital, you buy back stock and you increase dividends and return that money to shareholders. So that's a function of whether or not you think there's a better long-term economic use for your capital, or whether it's better to buy back your stock and return money to shareholders. And there's been a dynamic tension around that for quite a long time. There are a lot of value metrics that look like 2000. It is a different environment. Some of the companies that have lofty valuations are actually growing, have revenues, have earnings, and unlike the bubble period from 97 to 2000, there were companies raising extraordinary sums of money without products, without revenues, without profits, using that money to advertise whatever future product they might come up with, which is a wildly different proposition than what we're seeing today. Amazon can be selling it at a high multiple, but when you strip away their expenses, they do have operating profits, and they've also dominated a wide variety of different industries and really disrupted a lot of spaces. And you see that Walmart, Sears is about to go bankrupt this week. So it's retail, brick and mortar retail disruption is happening because Amazon has really access to infinite amounts of capital, and it may not come out in reported earnings, but they're doing fine. Generally speaking, yes, there's been some manipulation of earnings. Price to sales for now may be a better indicator. The other thing is, it really doesn't matter if interest rates continue to go up and you end up with a 3% 3-month bill or a 4 or 5% 10-year yield. That's going to draw money away from stocks, and risk assets will just simply look less attractive than they have in the last 9 years. So that's the real trigger for a bear market, is rising interest rates or the onset of war. Those are the two major influences. And for now, it looks like interest rates will be the problem. Yes,
So, as a person who's really affected by the H-1B immigration cutback, I've really had a dilemma for a major part of my life, which is, should I pursue something I'm really passionate about, something that won't really get me my green card in this country fast enough, or at all really, or should I pursue something that the country needs as a job and try to get my green card as fast as possible, because it's really just confusing. And
yeah, I mean, look, and I'm not an expert in this part of immigration law. I would say both, right? I mean, they're not mutually exclusive, right? I mean, you can have a passion that ultimately you can gravitate towards, but in order to stay, you need the green card, and there's no reason to risk that by chasing something that might not be immediately beneficial to you. So I would say do both. You have to sideline one for a period of time in order to stay, and make sure you can. And like most of us, would welcome you to stay. And what we hate to see is people get educated here and go back. Right? That's a huge problem. And then this administration's answer to that is by reducing the number of people coming. That's not wise. We've seen huge strides in innovation and industry for the immigrants who stayed. So, I would pursue the thing that has the most immediate impact on your life, and then also, at the appropriate time, pursue the thing that you're passionate about. Absolutely.
Excuse me. I got a question here.
Oh, there. Okay.
Yeah, I got a mic, so I might as well. I'm wondering, in the future, if you had to pick a couple stocks to forget about for 10 years, what would you go with and why?
For the last couple of years, I've just been saying, as a barbell trade, own Apple and McDonald's. Largely because Apple throws off an insane amount of cash, and McDonald's is actually becoming more and more a technology company as much as it is a food company. You've seen that reflected in the stock price. They're doing things that are not only ultimately reducing their cost of service, but they're raising the quality of the food against what's been intensified competition over the last couple of years. You know, the E. coli at Chipotle notwithstanding, they've, you know, seen a wide variety of companies come in and challenge their dominance in the space. 10 years forward, look, that's really tough, right? Because, you know, I could say, and I missed Google, I missed Amazon, didn't understand Amazon when it came out. You know, we thought it was a bookseller, it was really a cloud and infrastructure expansion company that we simply couldn't foretell at the time. So a 10-year forward look is really hard. For a young person, and we talked about this earlier in the day with the students, the better thing from a retirement investment perspective, because I'm not great at picking stocks in that respect and finding that one that's going to give you, you know, 300,000% return in 10 years. For your own deferred comp program, you buy what Fidelity is now offering and what other companies will soon offer is a free S&P 500 index fund. Maybe you do 70% of that, 30% in QQQ so you don't miss the technology move, whatever the next wave is, and stick that in your retirement account, and you can, believe it or not, you have more than 50 years till retirement, very likely. Right? I'm 57, my retirement age is 67, because I moved it in 1983. Most people don't even realize that yet, but at the tail end of the baby boom, your statutory retirement age is 67. It's going to be 70 for you guys at the very least. So you're talking more than 50 years of putting money away, just on the compounding and the fact that over any 50-year period, stock returns are generally higher than they were 50 years prior. So that's your first step. Picking individual stocks, that's something, when you're familiar with companies and when you're familiar with industries, that's when you can make your most informed moves. And so for me to tell you what's going to happen in the next 10 years, I'd be lying. You know, it's just, I think Apple will still be around. Will it be as dynamic as a stock as it is a company? I can't tell you. You know, McDonald's will still be around, you know, as far as I can tell. Sears won't be. So, you know, they're going to be a real estate put relatively soon, where Eddie just sells out all the real estate in bankruptcy. That's what's going to happen to Sears. That was his original intent anyway. But I would go with something basic to start and make that plan, and then start studying how you pick individual stocks. You read Warren Buffett stuff, you read Graham and Dodd. As an investor, you understand how to really price those stocks that have potential.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is this on?
Yes.
I want to know your opinion about the United States debt. I understand that, and most people don't realize that the largest holder of U.S. debt is the United States Social Security system. They've borrowed the hilt this money, and that is probably going to sink the Social Security system at some point as a result of that. What happens? How do we get out of this huge debt, you know, that we have?
War is usually good. No, prior to the tax cut and the passage of this 2-year budget plan that just went through, I was less pessimistic about this in the sense that we were growing steadily. Interest rates were pretty low, and debt service was manageable. With rates going up, debt service is now about $500 billion a year, and if rates keep going up, it may surpass the size of the budget of the defense budget, which is $700 and some odd billion. When you start approaching $1 trillion a year in debt service, you run into some serious problems, which you may have. Social Security, I am not nearly as concerned about, because you actually can fix the solvency of Social Security with a stroke of a pen by, let's say, and this, Chris Christie raised this, people lost their minds when he said it, but it makes all the sense in the world. Most of us around our age are probably working till we're 70. So to have a retirement age between 65 and 67 makes absolutely no sense, given the increase in longevity we've seen over the last several decades. Life expectancy now is 78. When Social Security was implemented, life expectancy in the United States was between 58 and 63 years. So they set the cap at 65, assuming that no one would make it. Right? So, or very few people would, and your reward for making it to 65 was a supplemental check from the government, into which you paid, you know, a certain amount of money. But looking at demographic trends, to maintain these retirement ages is absurd when this group of kids here very likely will exceed 80, maybe 90, maybe 100 years. So you're talking about 30 years on the couch. That's just silly. So that's an immediate adjustment that would, a 1-year increase in the retirement age increases the solvency of Social Security by 85 years, at least according to the Simpson-Bowles Commission. And the same with Medicare, 75 years for Medicare. And if deemed successful, costs crash, and we have much less of a problem in the healthcare world. The external debt that we have, some of which, the internal debt is held by Social Security, $4 trillion or thereabouts is held by the Fed, a lot of intergovernment agencies own US debt. China owns a little over $1 trillion, Japan owns a little over $1 trillion, then there's the UK. Our biggest problem now is the structural component of the federal debt, which at the current trajectory goes past 100% of GDP. It doesn't guarantee any particular outcome. You look at Japan, which has a 225, 250% debt to GDP ratio, and they've grown slowly for 20 years. China has a 300% debt to GDP ratio. We don't know what's going to happen there. They're either going to implode, because that's all of their private debt is really government debt for state-owned enterprises. So the notion that they have a smaller debt to GDP ratio, or that they're $3 trillion in reserves might cover their debt, we don't know, because we don't know how much debt they have. But there's no guaranteed outcome that, let's say, you're going to have hyperinflation, a crash in the dollar, and an explosion in interest rates. You're going to have just the opposite happen. Now, we'll see as we go through this trade war, if China stops buying our debt anytime soon, as in retaliation for the tariffs that we have on, we can see an interest rate spike that causes a recession. Rates fall back down, debt service costs drops again. So it is a problem, and it's a much bigger problem in the wake of the tax cut and the budget that we just passed. So the hardest part now is imposing serious austerity, and there is no single budget category by itself that would reduce the size of the debt, particularly discretionary spending. That's effectively a rounding error of the budget. So we do have to attack entitlements, not the way some people suggest. You really could index, as Alan Greenspan used to say, for longevity. You could make some actually fairly modest adjustments that take the burden off.
It just seemed though what happened in Russia because they increased the retirement age.
Yeah, they increased the retirement age in Russia. But remember that, I mean, first of all, Russians don't work the way Americans work. And I don't mean that, that's not a slur of the Russians. It's a radically different system. People who've relied on pensions as a major form of income for much of their lives. I mean, it's a radically different system with no economy to speak of. They have two resources in Russia. They have oil and they have diamonds. And there's a glut of diamonds, so they don't get any money from that. Oil's back up, but it's just high enough for them to meet their budget requirements. And not even quite, right? So their budget's being busted, and their economy's horrible. But we're overheated. They're not even cool, they're cold. So comparing us to Russia, I think, is a mistake. I mean, we do have problems in this regard that need to be dealt with squarely and head on. It's not going to happen for a while. And you go back to Churchill, who said, the Americans you can count on them always to do what's right after they've tried everything else. That's where we are when it comes to these particular issues. Yes, sir.
So, two of us on here. All right, I'll start. So I just wondered if you'd comment on long-term survival of the business model of Facebook, and Google, maybe Twitter.
I don't know. I mean, Facebook rather boldly just introduced a video communication service where you could have video chats with family and friends at a time when privacy is an open question. So whether you want to have a live camera in your house that Facebook controls, it may not have been the most auspicious time for them to introduce that particular service. Look, it's disappointing and terrifying that all these different companies have blown it on the privacy issue as badly as they have, and haven't even really begun to own this until recently, until everything was found out. And so it's either going to be self-correcting or it's going to be a regulatory resolution to this problem, and probably the latter more than the former. And I think one of the reasons the stocks have been down so hard is that people are anticipating some change in regulation, how your data are used, who has access to it, whether they can resell it, which they've done on a covert basis for quite some time now, which is why they're so wildly profitable. You know, so there are downsides to big data and the way it's used, and you know, sometimes big data also leads to big problems and you know, and big mistakes, and they're finding that out now. I would suspect that there will probably be some rivals, but it's going to be hard to catch up to the likes of Google and Facebook. Twitter less so, but still relatively entrenched. Snapchat, they're struggling a bit. Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, has taken on more kids. The fastest growing component of Facebook, by the way, is 65 and above. So there's this weird barbell within the company that grandparents have now taken over Facebook so they can see their grandkids, with various shots. Kids go on to Instagram, right? So and they're driving that model with video that's tailored to the younger people. This is a tough call. I mean, it's really hard to see around the bend on this. A couple more privacy problems at Google or somewhere else where they just shut down Google Plus because of the invasions they had earlier in the year. You're going to see some massive changes in the way they conduct business. Whether or not that impacts how much revenue they get, per user, cost of acquisition, and all that kind of stuff, open questions. But they've been printing money. Google is so deeply embedded in so many different businesses that we don't even, generally acknowledge. Internal search, they've farmed out a lot of different components of what they do. Now, some of this has a good side, even though it violates HIPAA regulations. Insurance companies can now underwrite you for life insurance in about 10 minutes based on the data they get from Facebook, MasterCard, Visa, and everybody else, because they know what drugs you're on, they know what your social media habits are, and they know generally what kind of stuff you do at night by how you post. So it's not cool, but the upside is in 10 minutes you can get $1 million life insurance policy that's priced appropriately. So that's the good side of it.
I'll just sneak in for 1 minute. We also have Dean Kamen here, and well, I would never impose upon him. The gentleman who invited him here did say that he would be happy to also answer questions as well. So we'll make sure to get your mic, Dean, but if you have questions for Ron, and Ron, listen, you're doing a great job. Keep it up.
All right, I'll try. Yes, sir. Okay.
Can you comment on the current housing situation, what's going on, lack of affordable inventory,
Question was, any comments about the current housing situation around the U.S.? And look, the housing market is correcting in a certain sense. We've seen housing stocks fall pretty precipitously over the last couple of weeks. Higher mortgage rates, where I think we've just crossed 5% on a 30-year conventional, is depressing relative to the recent past where people were coming in at 3 and change. And some markets have been extraordinarily high priced. The average price for a one-bedroom condominium in Manhattan is $1.6 million. And so the hottest markets in the country have been extraordinarily hot, and affordability has fallen pretty quickly in some of those markets. So we're seeing that fall off, and it looks like housing sales and auto sales both are slowing down domestically. Part of that may be the result of trade frictions and the inability to, necessarily in the auto sector, to plan around changes in the supply chain, redo of NAFTA, trade war with China, all that kind of stuff. Housing has just become largely unaffordable in many parts of the country. And so you are seeing these migrations back towards Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, places like that where you can get relatively inexpensive housing, and job prospects have picked up because the economy is so hot. But we're going to probably have something of a minor real estate recession. We're not levered the same way we were in 2006, 7, and 8, where the CDO market was on fire, a lot of securitizations, a lot of loose credit, although credit has loosened recently, both in housing and in more broadly speaking, in just lending generally. So, not systemic risk, but we could have a garden variety of recession. It's not the end of the world. People will freak out just because they've thought the business cycle's been suspended and the economy's heating up and is now making everybody relatively happy. Business cycle doesn't ever disappear. You can get a garden variety recession, garden variety bear market stocks, where the excesses are corrected, and it goes on for 6 to 18 months, and then it's over, and you start growing again if the Fed brings rates down and we find some other levers. The biggest problem is we have fewer tools right now. You can't do fiscal stimulus, given what just transpired. It'll be a little harder for the Fed to stimulate the economy, taking rates from 2.25 down to 1, than from taking them 5 down to 0. So there's a little less ammunition in the gun, but we could go through a downturn, and it doesn't have to be the end of the world. There are some outstanding risks, Italian or European sovereign debt crisis, something along those lines that can, full-blown trade war, those things could exacerbate any downturn, as we've seen in past historical episodes. But, I would just bet that the economy is about to slow down next year. And housing in particular, particularly in the overheated areas, which really, some of which are, if you look at San Francisco and some of these other places, LA, New York, Denver, Miami, really, really hot markets. Yes?
I was going to say, is there a way to predict some of these major trends in the economy?
Just call me. Yeah.
All right, I'll get your number later on.
Yeah, of course. I mean, look, I had an argument with him. I met Felix Salmon for the first day. It was the first time in my life, a couple days ago at NBC. He was a financial writer. And apparently he was talking to one of the interns and telling her how wrong I am about everything on the elevator ride down. He informed me as we were getting off the elevator. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, your view of the stock market. I said, well, yeah, I've been wrong for about 18 months. I thought it was going to go down. He goes, no, your view of the stock market as like anything important. I'm like, okay. He goes, I don't know you. I wanted to drop an F-bomb on him at the time, but I didn't do it. And he goes, no, it's really interest rates. I'm like, yeah, I know. I mean, I've been doing this for 34 years. I kind of know, where the levers are in the economy. And so, from my perspective, you look at multiple markets, and if you're getting the same message simultaneously from the interest rate market, the stock market, the commodity markets, they're pretty good when taken in concert at giving you a 9 to 12 month lead on what's going to happen down the road. And we are starting to get a little bit of a recession whiff from that. Rates are going up too fast in the US relative to inflation. Commodities have been under pressure, particularly economically sensitive commodities, copper, lumber. Lumber's been distorted by trade with Canada, but we've seen lumber prices crash. And again, that reflects what's happening in housing and housing stocks. And so when you see these economically sensitive commodities come down sharply, rates flatten out, the yield curve flattens out, the stock market starts to sell off, that could be an indicator that 6, 9, 12 months down the road, it gives you actually a fair amount of time to prepare for a downturn, that it could be, on the horizon. We don't have a uniform set of signals on that yet, so it's still kind of mixed. But when you see all of those three things happen simultaneously, there's a pretty good chance. Yield curve is the single best predictor, and not the 10 to 2 year curve that everybody talks about on TV today. I actually talked to the gentleman who did all the work on this at the New York Fed. It's the 10-year note to the 3-month T-bill. If that goes flat or inverts, you have anywhere from 9 to 15 months before there's a recession, with the average period is 12 months before the downturn hits. That hasn't happened yet. The spread's about 90 basis points. So if it were to come in and fall to 30 or 40, people start getting nervous and flattens out completely, you really need to start betting on a recession within a year. So that's the single best indicator that we know of. Any final questions?
I got a question over here.
Oh, yes.
What's your take on municipal debt? The cities.
Municipal debt?
Yeah, Chicago, Philadelphia, they don't have any money to pay their expenses. Are they going to go belly up?
Well, it's hard, as you know, it's hard for cities to go belly up. I mean, Detroit being the exception, having gone through a bankruptcy process. Look, it's possible. I mean, right now, revenues at the municipal level are up, and generally, because the economy's running so hot, there's less pressure on state and local budgets than we've seen in a while. Some of them are running surpluses, so to the extent that they can cover their obligations, it's fine. The next problem is during the next recession, and municipal revenue falls, and if they have too much indebtedness, they can't make their payments, and then you start talking about a Detroit or Puerto Rico-like experience. Right now, it's relatively stable. I mean, Chicago has a bigger issue, really, in some ways, is the unfunded pension liabilities of most of these things, right? I mean, and so there are some actually novel solutions that we've come across, that I'm not going to get too far in the weeds on this, that can be used to mitigate the impact of some of this. But really, the unfunded pension liability in New Jersey, Illinois, a handful of other states, Connecticut, to a certain extent, California, they're going to ultimately have to deal with that, either with a massive infusion of cash or some in-kind contribution of equity or something else that offsets the liability that they have. And again, there's probably going to have to be some pension reform, just like entitlement reform, that adjusts the future indebtedness of these places. It's not a problem now. It could be a problem. As I said, every downturn makes these problems that much worse.
So I have a question actually for Dean. Dean, I'm not going to apologize for this, but I'm a faculty in the business school, where we actually teach many of our students to be driven by
Agreed.
problems that there's a market need for. And I think a lot of what you're talking about, there's no quantifiable market need in the usual sense. So what's your advice to people who want to go out and tackle those problems where who knows what the market is for those?
I guess I'll stick with my original statement. I think not just technology's moved so far and so fast that there's a lot of problems that are now easily solvable that couldn't be solved in the past. It makes them attractive. It's fast. It's easy. It's just irrelevant. And sadly, I'll take it on directly and say I think the business schools over the last few decades have figured out how to, at the least risk, with the least commitment, skim off the top of all the wealth that's been created, the most money for a small group of people. And in fact, most of them, not this one, but there are very arrogant business schools that will quite proudly point out, you can make a lot of money, you don't have to create any damn wealth anyway. They don't say it that way, but it's true. And I find it offensive. I think a business school leader should be getting ahead of what will be the problems and figure out what skill sets need to be developed in their students and what encouragement, what inspiration, what courage they ought to give those students to go after solving those hard problems and have confidence that if they solve those hard problems in the end, as a result of solving those problems, they'll make money. Instead, as I said, it seems to me a lot of business schools start with, you can make a lot of money. The side benefit might be somebody benefits from it. But making money is what they teach people how to do. And whether there's a long-standing benefit from that is almost a secondary consequence. I wish all the business schools would focus on saying, if we put our time and our energy and our passion and our resources into solving this problem, and we do, we ought to make sure that the people that do it end up as a consequence making money. And you might think that's what they do. They don't. And they should change their ways. If you look at Wall Street 10 years ago, a lot of people made a lot of money. They didn't create any wealth. Then they wiped out a lot of people's wealth. They made more money. And if a kid steals a loaf of bread around here for his kids, he might go to jail. How many people on Wall Street ever paid any consequence for really wiping out the global economy? The lawyers and the guys in these business schools ought to be held accountable for their outrageous behavior.
You know, if I can follow up on that too, and I agree 100% with Dean, we have a public policy issue insofar as we don't have forward-looking politicians. And this may or may not be a popular place in which to say this. The current administration is looking entirely backwards at our set of problems. You know, taking coal as an example, where coal employment peaked in 1923 in the United States at just under 1 million people. Today, the coal industry, the mining industry employs less than 70,000 people. Solar employs 300,000, and wind employs 300,000. The notion that we're going back to 1950 to solve 2050 problems is absolutely insane. And for us not to press our politicians to be forward-looking and to anticipate future technological developments, which they have failed to do in every cycle, and even worse today than I've seen in my life, that they cannot anticipate what's coming and be proactive with respect to regulation and legislation. This will further create a gulf for those people who do make money in technology and those who are not competitive. We have this on the education front, we have it on the public policy front, we have it on regulatory and legislative front with respect to anticipating future change. And for us not to demand a greater amount of education and intelligence on the part of the elected officials, I think is a mistake for us. So, Taylor Swift for president, I think we're done. Thanks very much.
Swift for president. I got to tell my girls that when I get home. So listen, thank you all so very, very much. You've been a fantastic audience. Dean, thank you very much. I know we put you on the spot. We really appreciate that. We have some wonderful folks here this evening, so I'd like to, Ed, would you please come on up? Yeah. So we just want to recognize some of the folks who contributed to this evening. And Holly, I know we have a few gifts. We have a... No.
Because the type of business school that Dean talked about, no one reason is that I'm here proud of UMass Lowell. That's not the type of business school. The only school of business here, led by Dean Sandy, is the ultimate of how you describe, teaching the right values the right way and value. So I just want to say why you're here, and it's because we learned good values to give back. My second one, a lot of people ask me, how did you get Dean Kamen and Ron Insana here? And the honest truth is, it was actually kind of easy. I just asked. It wasn't because of me. It was because when I said UMass Lowell,
$25,000 payment.
That was no, honestly, it's a reflection of all of you. So for the students in the room here, your calling card in this university is amazing. So when you have gentlemen like this that are here, and they really are here not because of me, but because of you, it tells you something. So I just hope you carry that confidence to know, in the room, both these gentlemen, particularly I just left your office, I mean, you're changing the world. The opportunity, he wants to come here because he knows you can change the world. So, carry that with you. I'm honored, so thank you.
A small recognition actually for Ed, because he's really been here for us. He's supported us. Comcast is a partner of the university, and Ed, as a graduate of the business school, has really been a good supporter. So, Ed, I'd like to thank you. And Holly, I know we also have a gift here for Ron, who gave very graciously of his time over the last day and a half. So.
Let me just point out that as of yesterday and then until this afternoon, my in-laws were at my house, so I thank you for having
That's funny. Dean, would you join us on stage for a minute, please? Very good. So, Dean started with this comment about how we'd love to have more of our students here. And so, Dean, honestly, there's an easy way for you to do that. You just
I'll do it.
All right, very good. And then finally, he was up on stage earlier, so Tom O'Donnell, would you come up on stage? You've been really helpful in making this all happen. Fantastic. Thank you for taking part in this evening. Let's hear it for